9 people already into the live stream with 6 likes. Thank you so much for hitting that like button. Please continue to hit that like button as you join in on this live stream. Be sure and comment and share the video, do all the stuff. We'll get more people to join in on this live stream. And it always makes it more fun when we have more interesting comments taking place here to keep the live stream going. So today we're going to be talking about the Federal Reserve and their gaslighting of the markets. Now, this is something that I have been trying to explain for years now, really, in that the Federal Reserve is using their words, forward guidance, jawbone, incredible threats, like there's all kinds of names for it, that is now being deployed in order to conduct their monetary policy, because the adjustment of interest rates is no longer the effective tool. I have tried to communicate this out so many times out there in many videos, literally hundreds of them now. And so when I see it taking place and see it so prevalent within the economy, within the markets right now especially, I got to come out here and I got to continue to try and describe it and show how it is being done. And this is really like critical to the understanding of how it is you need to position yourself. I even left a TikTok video. This was sent to me earlier today of, I believe it was probably like a day trader or broker or something. I'm not sure who it is. But if you watch this video, it's like maybe a, I don't know, 5-10 minute video. You can hear the anxiety in his voice about trying to deal with the fact of this market falling so dramatically based off of the words that came from the Federal Reserve, coming from Jerome Powell. He even said it, this forward guidance thing shouldn't be taking place or something of that nature. It's because he misunderstood it. He misunderstands the forward guidance, the signaling, the jawboning to begin with, because he doesn't truly understand what the Federal Reserve strategy is that they have been communicating out there many times. Like, this isn't something that they're hiding. They just don't tell it in the mainstream media narrative. So you never hear it out there. But if you follow some of the statements that have come from the Federal Reserve talking about the monetary policy strategy, it makes perfect sense to why we are in the position that we are today. Now, think about it for just a minute here, right? Everybody, like literally 99.9% of the people out there, believe that the Federal Reserve is trying to go for a 2% target on the inflation rate. Like, they are trying to get to 2% and maintain 2% for a length of time over the long run. This is how people are interpreting this information. What I find like so discouraging about this is that that's the way that the Federal Reserve tried to conduct themselves for years and years prior to the situation we are now facing today. 2% target has always been their goal, to try and maintain 2%. They have never, ever been able to do it. Not once, not in the past, and they certainly won't be able to do it going into the future. They have never been able to maintain a 2% target. It will not work. They go for an average inflation rate over time with no mathematical formula for figuring it out. And now this is something that most people have no clue about. And I'm not trying to say that people are stupid or something of that nature. It's not communicated. It's not put out there that says, hey, we as the Federal Reserve are going to try and maintain a 2% average inflation rate over time with no mathematical formula for figuring it out. They do not communicate that out there to the mainstream media, to the markets, to the public, because if you were to think about it in this fashion, it wouldn't work. Like, they literally would not be able to do it. And so what they do is they go for an average inflation rate over time, which means that sometimes when the inflation rate has not achieved the 2% target, like the previous 10 years prior to the COVID, post-great financial crisis, they were not able to achieve the 2% target. Sometimes they did it. Occasionally they would get over. For the most part, they were under 2% for the entire decade. This is called make-up strategy, what we are facing right now, where they allow inflation to run moderately above 2% for some time. They don't give us the time. They don't tell us how long it's going to be, but they are going to make up for the fact that they failed to achieve the 2% target over the previous 10 years. This is something that has been communicated very clearly through many statements and documents coming from the Federal Reserve. Just type it in, Google it yourself. You don't even have to take my information for it. Google it yourself. Federal Reserve make-up strategy, and go and look at what some of the things that they are saying. They're going to make up for the fact that they failed to achieve the 2% target over the previous 10 years and allow inflation to run moderately above 2% for some time. August 27th of 2020, Jerome Powell gave a speech where he clearly talked about this change to the monetary policy strategy. So now when you start to understand that the Federal Reserve was not trying to bring inflation down to 2%, but going for a 2% average inflation rate over time with no real mathematical formula for figuring it out, you know that they're not going for this target, going for the average, and that the average is going to need a moment in time in which the inflation is running moderately above 2%. This is what we are experiencing today. The Federal Reserve said that they were going to do it, that they needed this to be part of the monetary policy, and that they were going to conduct themselves in this way. This is what they are doing. They are achieving that strategy, that goal. Now, the problem that most people are now facing is that they look at the adjustments coming from the Federal Reserve, this 2% or this 1% interest rate adjustment since they started cutting rates, has not yet impacted the real economy. People don't know this, right? People do not take this into consideration. Economists know it. People talk about it all the time, that there is a lag period from the time that the Fed adjusts rates to the time that it actually impacts the economy, and it can be anywhere from 6 months to a year. Now, you might be able to move that date up a little closer with the forward guidance, with the pushing out there of information that says, hey, we are going to be conducting ourselves in this particular fashion. You better get in position ahead of time before it actually takes place. Then you might be able to move that lag time up a little bit, shorten it up. But still, what we are facing right now within the economy has yet to have the initial rate cuts impacting the economy. It is just now starting to feel the effects of it. So all the stuff that we are hearing out there about the markets and the crashing and the Fed don't know what they're doing and they're going to have to change and all this other stuff, it's all market perception. It doesn't have anything to do with the reality of the interest rate adjustments because they are on a lag. I mean, it's not like they purposely put a lag period into the economy. It's just what it takes. When you adjust the rates, it takes time for people to actually borrow money at that lower rates, and for that lower rate to actually be significant enough for there to be adjustments within the economy that would be reflective of that. That takes time. And the more time that goes on, the more you'll actually see those rate cuts impacting this particular economy in a fashion in which that people would assume that a lowering of rates would do, but it takes time to get there. So everything that we are experiencing right now, including what is coming into the future with the idea of the Federal Reserve backing off on the interest rate cuts, again, everything we are experiencing from it is all just market perception. It's all the belief of what it is that's coming because none of it has actually started to take place yet. As far as the stimulating the economy with the lowering of interest rates, there was never going to be any stimulation from the lowering of rates. Never. It can't happen. Like, if you understood the fact that the neutral interest rate is too close to zero for the Federal Reserve to drop rates down below the neutral interest rate far enough to actually stimulate the economy, it can't take place right now. Even if they wanted it to, even if they take rates to zero, it would not be stimulating enough if we were in a recessionary type of environment that would give them the excuse to take rates to zero. Again, right? Understanding it from a long-term view, 20 years back. We go back even further than that. We go back to 2001. We're going on almost 24 years ago. That Ben Bernanke was saying, hey, we are going to eventually run into the lower bound of zero, and the adjustment of monetary policy through the Fed funds rate will not be an effective tool. That the forward guidance, the signaling, the jawboning, and what I have termed credible threats will be the effective tool that will then be deployed into the monetary policy through mainstream media, into the markets to get them to behave in a particular fashion. You can see evidence of it over the last few months. Think about it. None of the interest rate adjustments are really impacting the economy yet. This is all market perception. Every single bit of it, including the belief of what is coming in 2025 or the lack of rate cuts coming in 2025. Again, think about how it is that people are conducting themselves based off of this information, and it's completely credible threats. They're basing this off of the idea that we're going to have an inflationary scenario due to even more credible threats of tariffs coming from a president who is not even president yet. This is like, I mean, you can't even make this stuff up anymore on how well they are able to deal with the PSYOPs operation of conducting this propagandized information to make sure that the markets behave in a condition that is most appropriate to the Fed's monetary policy. That's what we are facing today. And it's really hard for a lot of people to understand this if they don't know about the credible threat theory to begin with. If they don't realize that this is a 20-year-old long plan. Most people think that the Federal Reserve is making decisions based off of information that they got over the last couple of weeks. This is not true. They are conducting themselves off of a very long, thought-out, strategic, methodical plan. And part of that is to make sure that you don't know what it is. That's why they are so vague when they talk about their 2% goal, 2% average or 2% over the long run. Hardly ever will you hear them say 2% target, and when they do, it is very misunderstood in the communication of how they delivered that information. Because they're not going for a target. They're going for 2% average inflation rate over time, with inflation moderately above 2%, with no mathematical formula for figuring any of this stuff out. That's what they are truly doing. All right, wow, 466 people up in here, right on, 481. Keep hitting that like button, everybody. We got 88 likes right now. Let's see if we can get it up to 200, 300, 400 likes right now with this many people up in here. Let's get some good questions and break this stuff down even more, because I know a lot of you are very familiar with the credible threat theory, those who have been following me on my channel for a length of time. You guys are very well aware of the credible threat theory. You know the speeches that I refer back to, but I know that there's people who have questions. They still haven't got it wrapped around their head what this really is, how it works, and I know that we can clarify this right now here in this live stream. We're going to do this for probably another maybe 10-15 minutes or so. All right, I hope he doesn't read that all-nighter hider. Uh-oh, what are you reading? What are you guys talking about? Let me go back and find it. Most people's long-term is only a few weeks, hence that's why they think Fed's long-term is only a few weeks, in my opinion. Yeah, I totally agree with that, with you, all-nighter. Most people, especially, like, I suffer this myself. Like, this is not something that is, like, because the people's fault, all right? I think this is just human nature, that when we get information in, at the speed that we get the information is the speed in which that we think that things are taking place. So, like, say, for example, if you had never heard of my credible threat theory and I start delivering you this information on the credible threat theory and I start showing you evidence of it and you start becoming aware of how it works, all of a sudden you're thinking this is happening very fast, right? But then really my credible threat theory that I have developed has been going on well over 20 years now, so it's very slow grind that's happening. But when the information comes to you and it's new information to you and it's delivered to you quite quickly and it overwhelms you at first, then that's where a lot of people think, oh my God, this is going down now, right? This is the whole thing. It's happening right here, right now. But really what's happening is that you're just now becoming aware of it. And the speed in which you're becoming aware of it, you're thinking that this is how fast it's actually occurring. I do the same thing, right? This is what ends up happening when I see it too. So it's like, oh man, this is going down. But then we have to realize we have to back it up a little bit and say, okay, wait a minute. This is a slow, methodical grind, because if it happened that quickly, then it wouldn't be able to work. They have to literally, like, almost hide it in how slow motion it works, because most people won't see it actually taking place then, right? Like, a lot of people don't realize, and like, this is really, I find very comical when I read a lot of like the mainstream media articles coming from a lot of the economists out there, is they talk about the Fed funds rate and the adjustment of the Fed funds rate as that being the main monetary policy tool. And so understanding that the Federal Reserve lost the ability to adjust monetary policy through the adjustment of the interest rates back during the Great Financial Crisis. Like, they went to zero. The Fed funds rate went to zero. Monetary policy was no longer effective, right? Through the interest rate adjustments, because they're at zero. Like, you can't go any further. There was talk, like, I think it was in Ben Bernanke's book, where he was saying that the initial estimates of how far the Fed would had to have taken the Fed funds rate negative in order to be able to stimulate the economy during the great financial crisis was something like 6.5%. Like they would have had to go below zero, 6.5% with the Fed funds rate in order to be a stimulating occurrence to the economy at that time. That's the reason. And they were like, man, this isn't going to work. We can't do that. Like literally, they're like, this isn't going to do. I'm like, no way. So they came up with the quantitative easing programs, which they talked about like long time, asset purchases in massive scale, right, to buy up a lot of U.S. Treasury debt and then let the United States government and the fiscal policies do the stimulating to the economy, as opposed to the people themselves borrowing the money to go out there and buy houses and cars and go on vacation. So this is really where the Federal Reserve was just like, okay, they were observing it. They said it. They were like, man, okay, interest rate adjustments at the lower bound of zero has essentially destroyed our ability to conduct ourselves with the typical form of monetary policy, which is that interest rate adjustment. But if you're at zero, you're done. So this is where the communication came into game. They knew that they would have to come down to the market perception of what it was that was going to take place going into the future and how well they were able to deliver that information. This is how the Federal Reserve is now operating, and that's why so many people are like losing their mind right now, is because it's a giant psyops game, right? Like if you could see the theory ahead of time, like you stand back and you're like, okay, so the Federal Reserve, regardless of any information out there, right? Because all of it is true and all of it is propagandized. But regardless of everything that is being said out there, if you just stand back and you think, okay, the Federal Reserve is going for moderately above 2%, right? With an average inflation rate over time with no mathematical formula for figuring it out. Now you take those two considerations, you step back regardless of everything that's going on out there, and what do you see? Moderately above 2%. With an average inflation rate taking place over time. I mean, these two things are occurring right now, exactly in line with what it is that the Federal Reserve said that they wanted to deal with. Now, everybody says, hey, they don't know what they're doing. They're flying off the seat of the pants. And they got all this excuses and reasons and blame and all kinds of stuff as market perception of the whole thing is being like just spun out of control. People who recognize the strategy ahead of time are looking back saying, yeah, there's a lot of chaotic events going on there, but the Federal Reserve is in a position in which that they have inflation in the economy moderately above 2%, and they're going to do it for some time. Wow, just like what they said that they were going to do. Right? So now I stand back and say, okay, well, I didn't think that they were going to get it down to 2% because they never have in the past. Right? Never maintained a target, so I don't believe that's going to be the case. I do believe that inflation is going to be moderately above 2% for some time because that's what they said that they wanted for their monetary policy. All right, so this is what we see going on. I'm saying, wow, the Federal Reserve, although they're not communicating, hey, man, we're doing it, they don't communicate that. They don't want to tell everybody, hey, man, we're landing right in line with what it is that we wanted to do. They're not going to communicate that out there to the people. But when you go and you look at their strategy and you think about some of the things that they said that they wanted for their strategy, this is it. This is exactly what they were looking for. Low unemployment, right? Although it's rising, it's still low. Great. Part of their dual mandate is to keep unemployment low. Right? Inflation moderately above 2% seems to be low inflation with stable prices. Well, even if it is moderately above 2%, which is their target, the target is an imaginary number anyway. Right? Some New Zealand economist central banker came up with that years ago, and they adopted it back in like 2012. Right? So that wasn't like set in stone that they have to be at a 2% target. It was completely arbitrary. And it still is today. All right. 684 people, my goodness. Let's go check out the super chat real quick. Thank you all for joining in on today's live stream. This is amazing. Candy Stuffed Corpse. I love some of these names you guys have. All right, $2. Thank you so much. Got to go to work now. I appreciate you, Simon. Well, I thank you, Candy Stuffed Corpse, for the $2. You're very, very generous with the super chat and helping to support the Uneducated Economist. You guys are so awesome with hitting that like button. That also helps support the Uneducated Economist. Just comments and just being here and sharing the video and everything that you're doing. All this stuff is just, it's just incredible. I can't thank you enough. And this is why I do this, right? Is right here is because I don't feel that a lot of people out there have taken on this sort of theory or understanding of the Fed strategy. In fact, I really do feel like I'm the only one. Like, I can't find news articles on it. I can't find other YouTubers who talk about it. I cannot find anybody else who describes the credible threat theory in the way that I have, who has taken back all the way, beyond 2 decades worth of like speeches and documents and issues that they have not only addressed but have communicated out there being a problem and how that they have and how they were going to plan on dealing with it, and you see it come to fruition years later. Right? And this is what we are experiencing right now, and this is why I try to bring it out as much as I can to say here's the evidence of it right now happening. I mean, think about all this craziness that is happening within the markets. I mean, the Dow, 10, like, how many, like a losing streak, a longer than in the last 50 years or something like that. Like, I don't follow the Dow that close. I mean, the Dow is a good indicator, but it's not the market, it's not the economy, right? It's just, it's part of the market. It's a good indication of what's happening out there, but that's very fearful headline, right? 10 straight days of losses, worse than 50 years or, since 74 or something like that. And when you see these things, like people like immediately start building up the anxiety and they're losing. They're like, oh my God, the Fed screwed up. They don't know what they're doing. They're, everything's going. And I'm thinking, guys, chill, right? All those rate adjustments that we have experienced over the last, few months have yet to hit the economy yet. Like, that's important to understand. Like, there is a lag time that has taken place, but all the things that you have seen occur over the last couple of weeks or months is literally market perception. It is all of a sudden their feelings of what it is that's taken place within the economy, and then they start conducting themselves in accordance to that, believing that the Federal Reserve has either screwed up or don't know what they're doing, or that inflation's coming back, or all this other craziness that is being communicated out there. And if you really think about the basis of all this information that they're talking about, it's all credible threats, right? Inflation's going to ramp back up due to tariffs coming from the future administration. The future administration, he's not the president yet, and the tariffs aren't here. None of that stuff has occurred yet. But yet, the understanding of this occurring has definitely ramped up inside of the markets and the people's decision-making in what it is that they're doing right now. Wow, 768 people. You guys are loving this. Keep going, man. Keep hitting that like button and keep joining in on this. Man, if I didn't have to go back to work here. All right. International markets will take over if the dollar starts to fall. But the dollar's not, this is the thing. Like, people thought a couple of years ago that the dollar was going to fail. The purchasing power is gone, blah, 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 all this stuff, right? Dollar's gone. Look at the US dollar index right now. It is higher than it's pretty much ever been. There's only been a couple of times in history that the dollar was any higher than it is right now. The dollar index is an indicator against a basket of world currencies out there. It is smoking. It is killing it out there right now. The dollar strengthening on the dollar index is not something that a lot of people are focusing in on, saying, man, look at this happen. I said it a while ago, the dollar was going to strengthen more than you could ever possibly imagine, and people thought I was losing my mind, considering that the Federal Reserve was going through all this massive quantitative easing, all this money printing, dollar destruction, cash is trash, and I'm like, don't take that into consideration too long, right? You think about it, at the peak of inflation, how many people were making decisions with their life and their finances to deal with an inflationary scenario, only to find that inflation started falling after that. They positioned themselves for higher inflation, and inflation started to fall. That's what ended up taking place, because the people react too late. If you wanted to protect yourself from inflation, you have to do it before inflation takes place. If you're protecting yourself from inflation as inflation is peaking, what you are doing is protecting yourself from something that is no longer the threat. All right? And it's, again, like, people miss it. They misunderstand it. Now we're looking at the dollar strengthening on a world scale on the US dollar index. The Federal Reserve was saying, hey, we're lowering interest rates. This would typically have the mindset of a weakening currency. You would think that the dollar index would fall on this, but no, the markets believe that the Federal Reserve is not cutting rates going into 2025, and that they might actually raise rates is causing the dollar index to rise. This is all perception. There's nothing that has taken place that would cause this to occur. There's no tariffs. There's no anything, none of that stuff. Right? Man, this thing is loading up. We got 824 people watching right now. This is a popular live stream. My goodness, guys. All right, the Fed just stopped the growth of the economy with words. They didn't just stop it. They can't just stop it, right? The market perception can then change, but then the economy, the real economy, is going to continue, right? That's the difference. I think it's really important to look at like what happens in the markets is very impactful, but it's not the same as the economy. The economy is you and me. The decisions that we make, the loans that we take out, the businesses that we start, the places that we invest, that's the economy. That's the real economy, right? The markets are the markets. It's very different. It's where people go and put money and pull money from, and then there's a lot of like wild swings within this as people's like, feelings and understandings and, what it is that they want to do with their money changes quite frequently off of the feelings that they have or the information that they get. You'll see these wild swings within the markets, but the real economy, the decisions that you and I make and stuff, even geez, I need to slow down. Even if they were to lower rates, think about that. Like how much activity needs to take place with those lower rates in order for it to impact the economy. Like you got a half an interest rate point down. Right? A half an or even a whole interest rate point down. How many people are going to go, oh man, I'm going to go out there and get me a car. I'm going to go out there and start me a business. I'm going to go because the interest rates are so much better, right? No. Handful of people might take a little bit of advantage of that little bit of an interest rate cut, but that little bit of action that's taking place within the economy is probably not going to be terribly noticeable on a big scale, right? But the markets will flip out over that information. Two very different things to look at there. Oh my gosh, 843 people. It's just like this thing is just growing. All right, Yui, where's your crow house fly off to? Where's your crown host? Where's your crown? I don't know what that meant. All right, Brody, keep hitting the like, support the channel, please, everyone. Yes, thank you so much. 850 people watching with 296 likes. Keep hitting that like button. This video will just go around and just keeps being spread across the internet as it gets uploaded. Come back, join in on the lives or on the comment section after the video gets uploaded. We'll continue on with this conversation. I think this is a very important one to understand, and it's not going to be easy because there's no place that you can go to. If you type in credible threat theory and you look at it on the internet, you're probably not going to come across any information that I have put out there. There's not a lot of people out there who understand the credible threat theory in the way that I have developed it, because I have developed it over years. Like, I did not realize what I was doing at the time when I was coming across this information and delivering it. But the more I was doing it, the more I realized, man, I am deviating away from what it is that a lot of other people are saying and communicating out there. And yet I hear a lot of stuff that's being said and communicated, regurgitated information that they're getting from each other on the mainstream media. And I'm thinking, does anybody dive in deep into these speeches? Because that's the communication to the other central bankers out there in the world. It's not communication to you and me. Right? I mean, when was the last time that, anybody had broke down a Federal Reserve speech other than the Uneducated Economist? Very rarely do you see anybody bringing these things up. But yet they're packed full of information, talking about what it is that they are planning on doing going into the future. Especially when it comes to stuff like, stablecoin kind of information, that's coming, right? Eventually they're going to pull cash out of the system. You're going to find stablecoins being used and being backed by the dollar, and monetary policy is going to transfer right into those stablecoins. I really think that's going to be taking place over the next 10 years. And you can see it really, being built now. All right. I'm missing it. What is that? Bulviating? What's that? All right, I heard Governor Harrigill locked down for bird flu. Certainly not Wednesday. Alrighty, guys, it's been 29 minutes into this. We have so many people up in here watching. I just don't want to give up, but I got to go back to work. So 869 people watching with 326 likes, 327 likes, $2 in super chats. You guys are just absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for being here. All right, do we have one more? Question: do you see a black swan event taking place in 2025? I don't know. Like, I mean, you can't foresee the black swan events, right? So you wouldn't know what those are going to be like. And when I think about people saying, "Oh man, this is what's going to occur. This banking collapse is going to happen, or this particular type of event's going to end up, destroying the economy or causing a huge depression or something like that." When I hear people describing how it is that the black swan event is going to occur, then I think to myself, well, the Federal Reserve is probably aware of this sort of theory and is probably positioned with some sort of tools to deal with this. And I think evidence of that had taken place when the Silicon Valley Bank failure started to happen. Many people ahead of that. There was many YouTubers out there who were screaming at the top of their lungs, get your money out of the bank, better do it fast, get it out before we have this economic crisis happening within the banking system, and bank failures are going to, destroy your deposits and all this other stuff. The fear of what was taking place was real. The reality was definitely not something to shun away from, right? I think the problem that most people faced at that time was that there was no communication coming from the Federal Reserve that says, hey, we have tools to deal with this sort of situation, and then describe those tools. Because if they were to put that out there, that information, then the market would then start pricing that in as part of the monetary policy tools. So they can't do that. So once the problem does exist, then the unusual and exigent circumstances then gives the Federal Reserve the ability to deploy some of these tools that nobody had ever heard of before. And this is the problem that I think a lot of people end up facing when they think about banking crisis or get your cash out of the bank before we have this collapse happening and all this other stuff, is they don't think about how it is that the Federal Reserve has probably built tools that are going to deal with this situation. Since we can describe it in detail what the situation is, they don't think about the tools that they have available because they have never been communicated out there and they've never deployed them before. So this is, again, like I think where a lot of people get very fearful of what's coming to the economy, believing that there is nothing that can be done about certain situations, but not realizing that there is things that can be done about it. They just never been communicated as part of their policy or strategies on how it is that they're going to deal with particular issues. So as people bring these issues up and they say, man, the Fed doesn't have any plan for this, not that they've communicated, right? Not that they've communicated out there. So if we can talk about it in detail, I would think that the 150 economists at the Federal Reserve, maybe one of them has probably thought about it too. Right? I mean, just saying. So when it comes to a black swan event, it really is probably going to end up coming from something that is just completely unforeseen. And even then, I don't think they're necessarily going to be black swan events. Like the whole housing debacle during the great financial crisis, when Ben Bernanke was out there on the mainstream media saying, oh yeah, it's a subprime mortgage thing, and we got that, kind of isolated to the subprime mortgages. That was complete garbage, right? That was credible threats going out there to the mainstream media. The Federal Reserve knew damn well that the mortgage market was about ready to go down under, because they had the tools to deploy to deal with the fact that they had all these toxic mortgages within the market, right? They started going into, troubled asset relief programs and stuff like that, like the TARP program. They had it all ready to go. Like they thought about it. They didn't invent that stuff on the fly. You don't really believe that part, right? Like, all of a sudden there's this huge problem with mortgages, toxic mortgages, and they're like, well, what do we need to do about this? No, they were sitting back there going, oh God, look at all these damn toxic mortgages in the system. This is going to be a problem. We better figure out a way to deal with that once it does become a problem, all right? Deploy TARP and whatever programs they had at the time. All right, you guys are awesome. I got to go. I just wanted to keep going, but I just can't. I got to go back to work. Uneducated Economist, please, thank you. I mean, please understand, I really appreciate everything that you guys have ever done for this channel, especially hitting that like button and sharing and being, joining in on this live stream. Please, thank you. I really, really appreciate everything you've ever done. All right, Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.